What is up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Travis. Of course, you are watching TWA Motorsports, and in today's video we are going to continue progress on the green truck. Now, I started filming some stuff and some stuff got mixed up, so I'm going to start you where I started and then we're going to continue the progress from that area. But if you're wondering, it is ridiculously hot and humid today. That's why I'm already sweating. I actually just finished up a video which you guys saw. I've already posted on the red truck out there. We got the drop finalized, or a majority of the drop finalized on it, but it is time. We've got some parts for the green truck and we're gonna see how much we can knock out in today's video. So let's get started where I left off filming before, and then we'll cut in and continue installing some parts at this point. Next thing I'm gonna do here is gonna make a mess, but I gotta get the power steering drained. I went ahead and got like a turkey baster and drained as much as I could out of the reservoir. And yeah, I mean, that's as much as I can get. So I'm gonna lift this thing up. We're gonna see if we can disconnect the lines, and then I'd like to get the rack completely out since we have a replacement. I'd also like to clean that area up, kind of where it mounts, if I can keep the lines out of the way, and then go back in with the new rack once we get some stuff painted. But let's get it off the ground. Let's get in there and see what we need to disconnect. One of the things I already know we're gonna have to disconnect, and I actually already loosened it up earlier to get the header off, is this guy. Oh, I'm gonna have to get my wrench. That's a tight fit. So we gotta unhook the steering column, obviously, because that goes into the top of the rack, which you can see is pretty gross. And then the only other two things are, we got two hard lines that come in, and I may be able to get to the front of those. Don't step in a barrel of oil up here. Oh yeah, we'll be able to get those off relatively easy. I feel like we got gobs of room here. Now you'll notice I got one of them off. 18 millimeters is what those guys are. And I actually had better luck reaching through back behind. So back like by the boot on the rack. I came up from that side and it was way easier. But you can see I kind of missed. Got some mess to clean up here. Got paint on the floor I need to scrape off anyway. So anyway, we've got the first one loose. I'm gonna go ahead and get the second one loose. And then these through bolts, these big long through bolts here in the front, you can see I've got oil dripping on them now from the line. We need to get those guys off. That's what holds the rack in place. But let me see if I can get that one other line off. That first one was relatively easy. Hopefully the second one doesn't fight me. Now that I got both those lines off, and even bigger mess down here, we're gonna get these off. Look at the bushings in that, all cracked and gross. 15/16, and they're all the way through. Isn't that crazy? But I don't have a 15/16 wrench, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put an adjustable end wrench on the back, and we will zap it with the impact in the front. I don't necessarily think we have to pull the bolt all the way out, but we'll obviously have to pull it back far enough to you know, to get the rack out. So hopefully it's not tied up with anything else. I don't see anything else. Oh, you know, now that I say that, I do have the transmission line zip tied over there. I better cut that. Make sure there's nothing else impeding this, and we should be pretty simple to take these two bolts out and get this thing outside where it can leak, and we can recycle it. You can see I got this thing out, but I will tell you guys, there is a ground on this stupid thing I did not see until I got both the bolts out and struggled with. And it is right here. You see that guy? I don't know who decided to put a ground there, but that is a real pain. I was struggling to go grab a 10 millimeter. I had to like push a bolt back through it. And, but anyway, it's out. And you can see that I've left the threaded end on. And the reason I did that is because I'm hoping that we can get this one set somewhat close to this, even though we're changing all this stuff anyway and we're gonna have to get it realigned. It's just a good idea to try to get it as close as possible. So I'm gonna use this as measurements, but I am gonna have to take this guy off, which I think is a 11 millimeter right there. We should be able to get it off of there. And we'll put it back on before it goes into place. But you might note the orientation of it. I don't necessarily know that it matters that much. It should only fit one way, but let's knock that 11 millimeter out and then put this thing outside where it can leak. What I did was I took this rack, set my old rack beside it, and tried to get the nuts for the adjustment on the tie rod as close as possible. It's not going to be exact. We're still going to have to align it, but the closer we get, the better. So at this point, I'm ready to put this rack up into place. I cleaned up my old bolts. That's what these guys are. I got new seals. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can get that in place. And remember, we have that ground, which is really odd to me why they go ground it there. But let's get these up there. Let's thread these bolts through. And I've already got it painted. I painted it off camera. And it's not perfect, but it looks a lot better than what it did. So let's see if we can get this thing hoisted up in there and get a couple bolts started. About the easiest rack on the face of the planet to put in. I just push those 2 bolts through, and they poke through the back, and then you just set this thing on. It's super simple. You know, with other stuff out of the way, I suppose. You're not having to fight with the lowers. But now that we got that in, I haven't tightened it up yet. We'll do that later. I'm going to go ahead. My goal here is to eliminate some boxes. So we've got all these boxes out here, and we need to make some progress. So I'm going to go ahead and open the lowers. I'm going to clean off the mounting points for the lowers, and we're going to be using the stock bolts, I believe, unless these come with something. I don't know. We'll open them up and see. I didn't think we were going to get anything, but I always like to open the box and check anyway. But these are our lowers. And they make them pretty dummy proof. They've got a P for passenger and a D for driver, which is awesome. So you can't screw them up. The hardware for the sway bar, which bolts to the arm here, it actually came in the passenger side one. So that's what this stuff is here. I think, unless I'm mistaken, I may have gotten doubled up on this, because I'm pretty sure this says, oh, it doesn't say. It's got a barcode scanner. I'm almost positive that this came when the sway bar came, but maybe because this was on back order, they shipped it separately. I will say, I don't see any grease. Oh, okay, there's the grease fittings right there. I was gonna say the grease zerks are not in there, but they're actually right here, which is perfect. And cotter pins, because this is that style. So we'll get this screwed in there, or at least started. You know, I will say that some of these always have an issue because the powder coating, but Ridetech seems to do a pretty good job of cleaning out some of their threading. Actually, I better check the size on this. We'll get them snugged down. I would like for them to point inward to make our life a little easier trying to put grease in them. I think that would make the most sense, but sometimes you can't get them that way. And then, like I said, we're gonna clean off the mounting area, and I'm just gonna loosely install these. Now, when putting these things in, you know, a rubber mallet is your friend. And there is a short and a long bolt. Long bolt goes in the back, short bolt in the front. And I think I'm backwards, but I don't think it's really gonna matter on the bolts. So we'll snug those down once we have the suspension loaded at some point. But I wanted to go ahead and get them in there. And honestly, I probably could go ahead and do the uppers as well and the coilover, and that may be where we go next. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, we got both sides in. I didn't think this through, but in order to set this thing down, I'm probably gonna have to put the uppers in, because as you can see, they're gonna hit the ground and I don't wanna scratch them all up. So we got that part done. So that eliminated a couple boxes out of my mess here. So let's see what we wanna go to next. Opened up all these boxes here, and this is what we've got. This is the coilover, the springs, the coilovers, all the bolts, all the stuff to put this together, and then the upper mount. So obviously it mounts on those lower A-arms that we just put in a little bit ago, but this is our upper mount. And so how this is designed is, see how this kidney bean style cutout is in there? So we use this square-headed bolt that goes through. And then once that's through, this guy goes on top in the old opening, and then followed by a washer, and then one of these nylock nuts. And I don't know actually if it's the little guy. It may be the little guy. No, maybe not. I think it's the big one. But that's kind of how that goes into place. I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna try to set you up on the tripod and show us putting together one of these coilovers, because they do, you know, some assembly required. You do have to take the adjustment knob off, which we'll do. I'll show you guys that before we put that in, but I'm gonna go ahead and put these in. I was gonna skip past this, but honestly, I can go ahead and put majority of the suspension in and, you know, try to clear up some of these boxes. I actually think I may go ahead and put this up here first, because we can do that and then mount the coilover to the bottom. But you can see what they're talking about, this like kidney shaped design. That is what's gonna meet up with that opening in that plate. So let's get that aluminum washer that goes down in the hole here, and then another washer, and then a nylock nut. I got the first one up in there and it fit great. I want to show you here. So we put this in the middle, and then once we get, you may have to knock that through because of the powder coating. Once you get that through, this is what centers it up. You can see this guy. That's going to center it up top. So we put that on, and we use a washer on top of that, and then we're using the thick nylock. This guy right here actually goes up top on the upper. Assembling these is not terribly bad. So how we're going to start, you obviously got to get some of this hardware out. I probably should have opened this before I started filming, but I'll have it done in less than probably 2 minutes. So we've got some parts here, like a snap ring, a screw, a couple pieces for the top and the bottom. So we're gonna grab the strut, spring, and I'm picky, so I want my hyper coil. I want that to go that direction. But what we need to do first, so we're gonna start on the bottom. We're gonna put this on, followed by this guy. This is where the spring's gonna set. And we'll adjust this here in a minute, but I'm gonna go ahead and put our set screw in. This kind of adjusts things. Oh, help if I went in the right way. But this is how you, once you get this set, it doesn't have like a jam nut like the other ones I've used. So like your Vikings or whatnot have a jam nut that goes on the bottom here. These don't have that. So once you get that started, you can take this spacer out, which is sometimes easier said than done. There it goes. I think that's just to keep this lined up so you can get this screw started. Once you get the screw started, you're fine. We're not gonna tighten that up yet because we're gonna have some adjusting to do. But you wanna get this guy on there. That's what makes life easy to spin this. You're also, I'm not gonna do it yet, but we're gonna put some anti-seize on this, which is required if you wanna keep your warranty. Next thing we need to do is make sure that the coil, if you're picky like me, is facing up as far as the writing goes on it. And then we're gonna put this on the top, but as you can see, can't get it on there. So because of that, we're gonna tighten this all the way. All the way tight. We're gonna take a T10, I think it's a T10 or a T10. We're gonna unscrew this while we're holding this. And we're gonna take this off. And so now we're gonna put this guy, this little washer, makes your life easier when you're spinning these down, and we're gonna put this guy on. But you're probably wondering, well, like what keeps it from coming off? Well, that's where the snap ring comes into place. So here's how I put the snap ring on. You can try to get a pair of snap ring pliers or whatever, but there's nowhere to hold it. If you just get this thing down and push it on, there it is. So now this can't come off. And we can put this guy back on, and our coilover is assembled. It's very, very simple. Probably one of the most simple ones you'll ever do. Don't over tighten this. We still have our adjustment. And now we can kind of spin it up and get a little bit of a preload. Now, like I said, we're gonna wanna put some anti-seize in there before we do this, like with any kind of weight on it. But I'll be able to, I'll spin this back down later and put some anti-seize on it. I will tell you this much. I'm gonna go put this in the truck now, but because of how close this is, we've gotta use these guys go up top. So the smaller ones, the bigger ones go on the bottom, and I'll show you that in a minute. But we gotta put these guys in place, but you don't have enough room. Remember, we put the plate that holds it up top first. You don't have enough room to sneak the bolt in. Even though it's a short bolt, you just don't have enough room. So don't tighten down that upper cup yet, because you're gonna have to spin it over to get this in. And I'm kind of one of those guys that likes things symmetrical, so I'm gonna have all my bolts pointing towards the back of the truck. I'll show you here in just 1 second. This is kind of the finished product. You can see what I'm talking about. If you have this snug down up top, you can't get that bolt through. So what I did was I loosened it up a little, turned it, and then put the bolt through, and now we have our shock in place. I also went ahead and swung the bottom up, put the 2 aluminum spacers in there, and got it in the second hole. So you got a big hole in the first one, and then the second one, same way on the other side. That's where it says to install it. It's in the second one. I don't know if you can experiment with that or not. I'm just doing what the instructions tell me, but got both sides lined up. So now, I don't know, I may go ahead. The instructions say to put the sway bar end links on. I may loosely put those in. I don't really want the sway bar in my way just yet because I'm going to do some work up underneath there, and I just think it's going to be troublesome. But what I may do is go ahead and put the end links on, and then possibly grab the uppers and get them in place. And the only reason is that's not going to interfere with anything I'm doing here. I'll still be able to reach in and do stuff on the engine. I don't want to impede on anything I have to do here. So let's possibly grab these next, and then the uppers. Actually, one other thing I didn't talk about is you can go ahead and torque the upper and the lower, because these are, they move around. We don't have to worry about like torquing them when the suspension's not loaded to 75 foot-pounds. So I did that on both sides. Also, it doesn't say anything about this top one, but I went ahead and did it at 75 too. Just make sure that kidney bean's lined up again, since we had to turn it to put the bolt in. Make sure that little kidney bean indention is lined up with the plate underneath, and should be able to get 75 up top. Probably shouldn't have done this, but I don't think it'll be in the way. I went ahead and put these on, so not much to them. This whole piece comes as one, and then there's a washer you put on the inside before you put it through, another washer and a jam nut, and that gets torqued to 50 foot-pounds. So like I said, I don't think that'll get in my way, but I wanted to just, I'm trying to get as much out of the floor as I possibly can. That's the goal here. So we'll move on. Like I said, I think we'll go on to the upper A-arms next, which we're going to be installing new, those guys there, I can't even think, eccentrics and adjustment bolts up here. Before I painted this, I spread those apart when I'm pulling the old A-arm out. That gives a lot more movement as far as putting the new ones in, because that's the biggest thing I'll struggle with. And I'm also going to use some of that grease that you see there on each A-arm. So I'll put some on the bushings, we'll slide them into place, and hopefully get these bolts. I've tried to mark them as close to the pins as possible so we can try to get the alignment somewhat close, but either way, we're still gonna have to align it. You don't have to keep these like side specific, because they're not side specific, okay? You can put one on either side. They're both the same. Anyway, I've got those in, and very simple. I just literally put grease on them because I opened those pockets up a little bit when I took the old ones out before I painted. And I always try to clean really good in there. You know, I don't put a ton of paint in there either. I want that to crimp down on that bushing. That's what it's supposed to do. But at the same time, I want to put some grease in there, try to, you know, hold down the squeaking. But I'm going to put the grease fitting in and knock the other side out, and then we'll move on to the next part. I think I could go ahead and put my spindle in, but I may have to do some cleaning on my backing plates. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I don't remember exactly if the spindle can even use those backing plates. Moving on to the spindle. One of the instructions was kind of weird on this. On the uppers, it says that you're gonna have to clearance the bottom of the top ball joint opening. So the upper A-arm goes into the top of the spindle, and it says you're gonna have to clearance it with a 1/2-inch drill bit. Now, I don't know if that's for a stock one, if that's the case, because I got a 1/2-inch drill bit just to see, and it goes right through. So, and I also test fitted up there, no issue. So I don't know what the deal is with that, but I guess maybe that was an issue on some of the stock ones. I don't know anybody that would use a stock one. We want to get this thing low, right? So let me grab the instructions. I'm sure there's a torque spec on this, and we'll probably have to use a little red Loctite. Next thing I'm doing here, I put these in with a little red Loctite so they stay in place. And so I painted these. I just brushed a little bit of like Rust-Oleum style paint on the kind of closeouts for the, I guess they'd be kind of like a backing plate of sorts. So I'm gonna see if we can put those into place. I think those are trimmed from the last spindle I used, and then we'll get the new hub, the Timken hub right there. We'll see if we can get it up into place. And I actually think that it came with new bolts, so we don't have to reuse our old nasty ones. You can see I got the bearing in, and I put this backing plate, it only goes one way, okay? And they're not, I don't think they're side specific, but you're gonna use the nut that they supply on the upper, and this gets torqued to 75. And then, like I said, these new bearings came with new hardware, and this gets torqued to 133 on both the lowers. And then just make sure that your wiring goes through. I've got mine just kind of dangling there, and then this is what I was holding when I was painting it. But let's get these tightened down. Got these bolts torqued to 133. This one up here torqued to 75. You had to use a crow's foot on this, by the way. I did go ahead and torque the uppers and the lowers. I thought I had done that earlier, but I guess I hadn't. Bottom torques to 92, and then you have to obviously line up the cotter pin, the cotter key. Did the same thing up top. It went to 37 on the top. So we'll put some grease in that before we get ready. But I think I'm gonna continue moving in my pursuit to get rid of boxes. That's nice and sturdy now and strong. I'm gonna move on to the brakes. I'm gonna get the rotors out of the box, which we're just using powerstop. Same thing that was on it. I just decided to get new ones, and I moved the ones that were on here onto the red truck. So let's get those out of the box, just set them on there. I'll probably get a lug nut and just run it down so it stays tight. And then I'm gonna clean a little on my brackets and put the new hardware that comes in the kit on those and get those like loosely fitted for now. As you can see, I got these cleaned up, and actually it didn't come with new hardware. My hardware wasn't bad, so I cleaned it up. I don't know why it didn't come with new hardware, but so the spindle or the hub assembly came with new brake bolts for the bracket. So I just put those in. Kind of cool that they came with it, but I torqued those to 145 and then obviously put this back on, and I went ahead and put my pads in. I'm not ready quite yet to shove the caliper into place, but I did put a little caliper grease where this slides, and then we'll re-grease these guys up when it goes back together. But I don't think, I'm gonna clean those off a little bit, obviously, before I stick them on, but I don't think I'm ready to do that yet. I've got a new set of brake lines as well that are gonna be going on, but I may step back for a second and see what I wanna do next. I'm kind of trying to decide. I noticed one thing, that this doesn't have a mount for the upper brake line like the factory did. So this guy right here, which I don't think my aftermarket lines have that either, but maybe we'll just have to zip tie, I guess, to the A-arm. It's kind of a nice shape to do that. Now, I told you I wasn't going to put the brake on, but I think I am, just so it's not dangling here and scratching up against my A-arm. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to clean it up off camera, compress it, and then we'll get our torques back in here. And I think they torqued to like 81 foot-pounds, if I remember correctly. So we'll get, or 84 foot-pounds, I think. So we'll get that in place. We'll worry about the line later on. I'm also going to go ahead and put my 13 millimeter back in to secure the brake. I didn't even think about that. It's been hanging on that this entire time when it's up in the air. So let's just get it in place, and then we'll do the line. We'll worry about the lines a little later. Brakes in place. Now we're going to be replacing the brake lines later. That's what that box is right there. But I don't feel like having brake fluid everywhere right this minute. And I still may, it probably would be fine to go ahead and do it where it's not interfering with anything, but I'm test fitting some other stuff here. So I took my Glenn's Auto Performance bracket off of my trucool. I think it's a trucool 40K, pretty common in these things, but I also bought transmission brackets or transmission cooler brackets from the same company that I got the intercooler bracket from. So they make this integrated bracket, and I'm trying to show you guys kind of how it mounts. So you can see the bottom side of the intercooler mount, and we still got to lay it back a little bit to gain some more grill clearance. But I went ahead and put the inner bolt in, and it looks to me like these line up with the outer bolts. At least I'm hoping so. So I've used their nuts and bolts to put kind of this together. So at this point, I'm gonna swing this up into place. I think, honestly, the easiest way to get coolant lines to these is to keep these on the bottom. I don't love it, but I think I'm gonna have to use a 90 and possibly a 120 to come up and around, but we'll just have to see. I'm gonna loosely fit this thing into place, swing it up and at least start some bolts just to see how it looks. And it's still leaking transmission fluid. It's a lot better if you're using a new one here, but obviously this is the one that came off the truck. It just used to be where the intercooler is. So that Glenn's Auto Performance is a great mount, but when you have an intercooler, you know, obviously it doesn't work. But this will position that transmission cooler in this opening here. Let's see if we can get it up into place. There's like no good way to get to the bolts with the bumper in place. So we are gonna have to undo our fog light, take this 15 millimeter out, and then I think there's two 18s in the front. Chances are I'm probably gonna have to take the intercooler out to get to those bolts. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to. I might be able to reach them from down below. I don't know. Yeah, okay, maybe I could take these lowers out down here, and then the uppers, I think I can go around the outside of the intercooler. So I may not have to take the intercooler out, but the bumper is definitely gonna have to come off. Wouldn't you know it, one of my captured nuts for this guy right here broke loose. So now I'm all sweaty. Okay, now we've got way better access. This is probably the best way to do it. I was just trying to avoid it. We can go ahead and snug all this stuff down, because this down here is where it needs to be. And we can lift this cooler up into place and it will be where it needs to be. And I actually have access to start a bolt here now. Well, that didn't go well. I actually had the brackets on backwards. And how I knew that is the way they set up against this, they set nice and flush. And so I had to take my cooler off, swap the brackets side to side, and now this makes a lot more sense. So now we can put our bracket back up and put our bolts back in to hopefully hold it into place. Yeah, I just don't see doing this with the bumper off. Anyway, so you know, that's kind of the way the brackets face, and then your intercooler or trans cooler goes on the front.